JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon says that the US economy is speeding towards a cliff as debt continues to mount. And I honestly don't think any of you guys are surprised by this chart right here that showcases just how crazy the United States debt has been looking over the past, 70 years or so? It's just absolute insanity. And in just about 2, 3, 4 days from now, kind of depending on where you are in the world, we've got the United States interest rate decisions coming out, which still, as of this point, is at a pretty crazy level if you ask me. But if we're talking about when will things finally change, Benjamin Cohen said the market is expecting the first rate cut in May, potentially slightly earlier, but at that point it's got a majority probability. And you can see that's when the economy could, theoretically speaking, start doing better again. Because as we've stated before, interest rates being extremely high means people are literally saving more, investing less, because the cost of capital is higher and your propensity to consume right now is lower because you'd rather extend it into the future because you get a high yield for waiting. And that changes, meaning people go spend more, go invest more, go produce more, and that basically causes the whole cycle to move up. Things get more expensive, which becomes extremely interesting when you take into consideration that the S&P just broke its all-time high, even leaving a little slight gap right there. So some little correction most likely is not too far off. But anyway, it is interesting to see that this would basically, following logic, make the markets now recover and do a lot better, which is peculiar because they've already been doing so well, even though the real state of the economy is quite bad. Again, the debt in the reality of things is just going at a crazy pace. And I often like to show you guys this chart by Trading Shot. With regards to the Bitcoin price, that whenever the S&P makes an all-time high, roughly 1 year later, Bitcoin makes its all-time high. And it becomes more interesting in a situation like right now, because indeed it seems pretty logical that the S&P is continuing towards the upside, making Bitcoin follow the exact same patterns as before. And the reason I'm saying the S&P looks for further upside is because rate hikes, yeah, it just makes sense. The only problem we have is if things really get on a on a tangent here, because my story here comes to a grinding halt when it comes to interest rates decreasing again, but because the debt is so high that basically can't happen. What's funny is here's, for example, a little article that read, how worried should you be about federal debt? Or the deficit and debt. And one of the funniest parts here is that at the bottom, it talks about if current policies persist without change, a big if, the Congressional Budget Office projects the deficits and the debt as a percentage of GDP will rise as more Americans become eligible for Social Security and healthcare costs continue to increase faster than the economy. And as interest rates rise more to like normal levels by 2030, the debt is headed towards 118%, according to recent private sector projections. And while the recent increases in debt seem quite manageable, the federal debt cannot grow faster than the economy indefinitely. Eventually, private borrowing will be crowded out if the government's debt continues to grow, and interest rates will rise. At some point, action will have to be taken to rein in the deficit, but we may be a long way from that point. And that's where our man right here comes into play, because the debt just keeps on increasing. And really, starting to look at all the numbers, things are bad. And it's quite interesting how we've managed to do so well, even though the numbers are no joke. The red line is where debt to GDP ratio surpassed 100%. But then again, you have to understand that the moment that things crash, it's crazy because your debt gets worse and you get a lower GDP and everything gets worse. So it's like, well, we're in a really, really interesting spot. And I really wonder from that perspective also how the crypto market's going to react. I mean, let's be realistic here and say, for 0 seconds, think the crypto market is set for a bear run. It just seems extremely logical that the bull phase is nigh, right? That we are basically in for massive gains over the next couple of weeks/months. And honestly, it's going to be very hard to tell me any different. I don't think I can accept it. But then the question becomes, in this whole scenario, right? What now that the S&P actually goes for a massive crash, for example, the stock market crashes, will this similar pattern of beating an all-time high in the S&P, a year later Bitcoin making a new all-time high, continue? And can it continue if this time around the S&P makes an all-time high and crashes afterwards instead of continuing on greater as well? At least in my opinion, that's been a really interesting question on my mind. And if you're watching this far into the video, make sure you press that like button. You've got nothing to lose, it costs you nothing, but it does help out. Every single like helps out a ton, so make sure you press it. But now before we move on, I want to quickly talk about today's sponsor that is called Wirex, and they actually just launched a new product called Coca Wallet that includes a couple of very interesting non-custodial cards. But one of the reasons I personally think this wallet is pretty cool is because it has inbuilt fraud and theft protection with a Web3 firewall and apparently some legacy transfer coming up, which is pretty interesting. And even though I'm personally a big fan of these non-custodial cards, and in this case they actually have a physical non-custodial card, which a lot of these other companies can't get, I think a lot of people are actually interested in this part right here, the DApp discovery at ease. Meaning that you now have a card, a wallet with firewall, and easy access to DApps. And I think that's why like 700,000 people already downloaded the app, and it's got some pretty juicy reviews. And now here's something else that's pretty nice. I'm giving away $20 to 3 people that like, comment, and go follow the Coca Wallet on Twitter. So I'll send you guys a $60 tomorrow, and I'll just pick them randomly. Or maybe somebody with the coolest comment. Not sure yet. But anyway, let's move on with the video. And definitely take a look at the wallet because maybe it's something for you. I personally like it most for the card. Some people might like it most to just store crypto, whatever. What a wallet in crypto can do. Just check it out. You'll probably like it. But you know what's more interesting though as well? It's a matter of if everybody, and this is something I've been thinking about for a long time, right? If everybody is on the same page right now, that the US economy is something has to change basically, right? What will happen to funds? Won't they start to get more interested in a safe haven, but a new one, like a Bitcoin, like a cryptocurrency? And knowing this, think with me here, wouldn't that be a very good reason why BlackRock wanted to get things approved now, before the whole massive crash and before the flight to safety gets to an extreme level? Wouldn't it make sense for the biggest asset managers in the world that have noticed from their clients there's massive demand for this? And if you watch any interviews, you'll know the only reason they went for this is because of client demand. Wouldn't it then make, I can't roll these things down. That is okay, interesting. Wouldn't it then make so much sense if they also know what's coming? Why otherwise would there be such a need for a flight to safety akin to gold if they didn't think something bad was going to happen? That made a lot of these guys think of finding some safety in a Bitcoin. Again, I'm just throwing some balls around here. It could very much be that these guys are just interested in diversifying portfolios with no real crash looming, right? Not even in the picture, not even in their minds. They just want to diversify. But I'm putting it up there that it is pretty convenient. Anyway, a couple of other interesting things that are going on right now as we speak is that the biggest crypto guy, right, the founder of Binance, CZ, is actually still stuck in the US. He wanted to give up equity to be able to go back to my place here, to the UAE, but he's not allowed to. Well, at the same time, we are actually seeing, it's not in the article here, by the way, a lot of progress being made in the crypto courts. I mean, on every single field. I'm talking FTX, Celsius, BlockFi, all that is making steps. Mt. Gox is making steps, but also on the opposite side. Binance lawsuit, the Coinbase lawsuit, the Ripple lawsuit. Like, it's starting to get interesting that everything is concluding and that really the consensus as to how crypto is regulated, it ain't close, but at least there's a path there. Whereas a year or two ago, there was basically nothing. It was really the wild, wild west. But this is also interesting now. What, for example, is Ethereum's status? Is it a commodity? Is it official in the US, for example? Well, the ETF for Ethereum has just been denied from BlackRock and I think from a couple of others like Grayscale too. But I think we still, for a deadline, have about 120 days, 110 days, something like that or so to go. And the consensus is that the Ethereum ETF will probably be decided on the official last day, just like with the Bitcoin ETFs, because it's Gensler, right? It's Gary Gensler, and he's the spearhead behind all this. And matter of fact, crypto enforcements right now are at a 10-year high, and that's kind of interesting if you start thinking about it. Something else that's really high is Grayscale's amount of money. Damn. Let me just take a look at these guys. They've still got 500,000 Bitcoin, $21.2 billion. Today, up $300 million. And I know it's not just Grayscale's money. I know. But the amounts of money they've been selling is insanity. And they've got so much left. But even JP Morgan there also stated that this whole selling of the Bitcoin is largely concluded. I mean, most of these guys that got in for the premium, we talked about it before, at some point it's kind of over, right? And I mean, a lot of those guys that are getting out now are most likely just funding it back into BlackRock anyway, because the fees are going to be a lot lower there. So for it to flow out of GBTC makes sense, but for it not to flow right back into a different ETF, I don't think makes that much sense anymore, because from their side, right, from the client side, why wait? Why not get out as soon as possible? Oh, because they want to wait for higher prices? Yeah, but if they're speculating on the price day to day, wouldn't it make sense for them to continue doing that then? If they're not caring about the fee, if they're not caring about just realizing the premium difference they could have gotten, wouldn't then it just be like holding it for the sake of holding it like any other participant? Anyway, those things I've all been thinking about. If you're wondering, what's the next big thing to watch, Dusty? What do we got checking out? Honestly, guys, I would say just keep your eyes peeled on the Federal Reserve interest rate decision coming out on the 31st of January. Extremely important if, funny enough, something happens. If it changes from 5.5%. You better make sure you're behind your computer looking at your screen, because things would go crazy then. Again, the expectation is it's not going to happen based on all the previous calls. You already know that we're going to be streaming it live, this press conference here at 11:30 p.m. Dubai time. Check out for yourself what time it is. Make sure you put your notification bell on and you're here in a few days to watch this live together. And hopefully, I'll see you guys again in another crypto video somewhere later today, tomorrow, who knows.